Welcome back, everybody. I just wanted to put out a disclaimer that today's interviewee, Seth Gehle, um, put a disclaimer on the episode, not him at all. What I mean by that is saying that today we dive a lot into his history of sexual abuse from a young age and what led him to calling the police at 16 years old. Seth is an author, an ultramarathon runner, a combat veteran, a father, a award-winning contractor. So we talk a little bit about everything, fatherhood, all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to put a disclaimer out there that this episode may not be for young ears. Seth was a victim of sexual abuse of over 200 times in his life, and we do dive a little bit into what you can look for if you are someone who may be around that without even knowing that you are around that. And by that, I mean sexual abuse or extortion to some point of degree. So with that, I will let Seth speak in his own words about what had happened to him, where he is now in life, being a father himself. So like I said, I'm going to let him talk about it. His book, Strength Beyond the Shadows, you can find that on Amazon. And his website, sethgehle.com. And with that, I will bring the interview. Yeah, so like I was saying, if you can hear the little, I have a 2-year-old upstairs, and he's pretty much like he thinks he's playing football all the time right now, and he's tackling everything in sight. And he goes up to our dog. We have like a lab, and he likes to pull on his tail and I'd like to see if it comes off, if the tail's detachable, or if the ears come off and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, you got to realize your own strength at like 2.5 years old. I know you got a couple of kids yourself, right?
Yeah, I got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and that was something I had to do with them for a long time because we have a German Shepherd.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they would love to grab a hold of her, lay on top of her, climb on her, pull on her tail, pull on her ears. And so I had to get on them a lot when they were younger to not do that, so the dog doesn't turn and bite. So
Yep. Yeah. It's I'm like, dude, you're the testosterone pumping through your veins right now, man. Like, you gotta realize, he grows up to him, he grabs him, and it starts whimpering. He's just sitting there looking at me like, Dad, can you help me out with this little gremlin we have going on right now, just to get him off me and whatnot. But so if you hear anything in the backgrounds, like I was saying, that's him playing upstairs with Mom right now. But Seth, I appreciate you joining me on tonight's interview, and it's been a long time, like in the making, like I was, saying a few minutes ago. I think you had initially reached out to me in 2023, and at that point, I wasn't recording podcasts. I stopped for a while during a move, and I'm just picking them up again right now. More consistent schedule right now, and I really do appreciate the fact that you were flexible with me, and still had the ability and still wanting to come on the show to promote your book and your speaking engagements.
yeah, man. I mean, I appreciate it, dude. I'm not above anybody, so I'll talk to anybody who wants to talk and have a good conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just seen you on the Clear Top podcast, and I was like, I remember that guy, and I'm like, well, he's clearly on Andy's show right now, and he's probably not going to have the time to come on my show. But me and my 12 listeners, we do appreciate it. So.
Well, there's it's we talked about this the other night. It's funny, like and I thought this too, like when I started this whole like journey of writing a book and telling my story and traveling and speaking and podcasting, that I thought that, I had like maybe the wrong idea of what was going to happen. I thought that like I would start getting interviewed, and then I would get on these channels, and then these bigger channels, and then like everybody would see it or something, and then like I'd gain this like massive following, and that's really not the case. It's kind of crazy. So I guess a cautionary tale to anybody out there who's going to go do what they want to do. If they want to go tell a story and get on podcasts or run their own show, it's like a consistent grind that it takes to do something to like make a big impact, I guess.
Mhm.
So I just thought that like when I started speaking, things would just start coming my way, not in a arrogant way. I just
Right.
thought that that's just how it worked. I didn't know. And so, I've got interviews, like I've been on the channel Soft White Underbelly twice now. And the first interviews got almost 2 million views. And, you know, I've, I've gotten a couple speaking engagements off of that video, but aside from that, you would think with 2 million views, like that would be maybe life changing for some people. I don't know, but like you would think that like something like that would be like monumental, and it is. I mean, I don't know how to say this without sounding arrogant or like unappreciative, but it's just I think the world thinks that when you get a million views on something or you get on a big platform, like things just change. And it's funny, like I wrote my book and
Mhm.
I published my book, and you think that when you publish the book, like you've done it, you've completed the tasks, like you've done the thing. Like that's just the beginning. Like writing the book is just the beginning. Like
Right.
the work doesn't stop. Now, if anything, it only gets harder from here. Like it only gets
Mhm.
harder to push it and sell it and do all the things.
Promoting the
So
book and getting it out there because, you have like probably have some sort of agency that's I don't know if you're dealing with one, but just getting it out there and people pay to have them, put on the top of the list, or searches, all that sort of stuff. And I can only imagine the amount of, like you said, all right, you didn't realize that you thought the hard part was done, and now, especially in your case, it must have been extremely emotional writing your book, but now comes the legwork hard part, getting it out there and getting it, you know, publicizing it for lack of better terms, I guess. Just getting it out there and spreading the word as best you can. Did you go through some sort of self publishing process, or did you work with a large company to do it?
I self published. Yeah, I worked with a consulting company
Hmm.
that basically gave me the pieces. They connected me with the right people, editors, designers, things like that. The name of the company's My Word Publishing, and so I worked with them, and they connected me with a good editor, and my consultant. She actually ended up designing my book cover, and they connect you with the proofreaders, and they kind of give you all the resources, all the tools, and you pay them like a fee to essentially help you get your book launched. They teach you about marketing. They show you how to market and how to do the thing, and then you just have to do it. You just have to do the work. So I actually have not paid for. I've not paid for any advertisements. I've not paid for any marketing, anything like that. Like I've not paid any systems or people for it. I've done it all myself, which I think is that's kind of like one of the lessons I try to tell people is like if you want to do anything, whether it's doing a podcast, writing a book, whatever it is, you know, nowadays there are so many ways to finish or complete something in a few seconds with like
Right.
mostly AI.
Yeah.
So even when you're generating a podcast or writing a book, whatever, or creating content for Instagram or YouTube, I mean, you can use AI, create some video, throw it into a generator, and it pops out something that's supposed to be compelling, captivating. It's supposed to hit the algorithm and do all the things. And in reality, it just doesn't work. Like it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, but it sells and it looks good and it's an easy way to complete a task. So a lot of people do it. And thankfully, I didn't fall down that rabbit hole of using AI to complete everything. I just all the videos, all the content, everything that I make is I do it on my own. And I got that from one of my mentors. Like one of my mentors I reached out to um, when I first started really getting on my book. He told me that's what he did. He said he didn't
Hmm.
pay for anybody to do anything. He made all the content himself. He,
Is that Nick?
freaking yeah, it was Nick. Yeah, Nick
Yeah.
Lavery. Yep. So yeah, Nick, I got on a call with him and he told me everything he did. And so I literally just went back 2 or 3 years on his page and I just started doing everything he was doing. Every little bit of content that he was creating, I was just trying to create like a mirror image of it in my own spin,
Right.
and that's what I did.
I mean,
So
he's obviously successful in doing that. So I think that's why reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They,
Like,
they call it like following the leader, right?
yeah,
Anything you want to do, if you want to be good at a podcast, go look up the best podcasts and see what they do, you know?
right, right. I see. Like, I mean, I'm remodeling my studio, quote unquote, my basement and finishing that. But you see these like, and I'm not obviously my podcast is new, but you look at these newer podcasts that look like professional studios, and I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck am I doing wrong here? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and it's yeah, I think there's something to be had for like especially like podcasts or interviews. I didn't realize the amount of legwork that would go into. I mean, I'd record one of the first interviews I recorded was about 3.5 hours long with a buddy of mine, who had been shot in the line of duty, and I think I spent another 10 editing just that audio, and there was no video behind it because we were sitting at a desk and just and talking about everything, and just the amount of, like you said, like you can the algorithm gets you every time. And I'm just scrolling through Instagram and I see different like companies that are like AI companies, like you're saying, just advertising like, hey, upload your video to this platform. We'll give you the 10 or the 30 10-second clips or whatever,
Yeah.
however long or whatever it is. And I'm like, man, you've got me for a few other things, and I'm not falling for that trick right now. You know, it's but then I look at like larger, like either obviously Rogan must not do all of his own things, but and I don't know how Andy does it, or I know a little bit about other podcasts and how they do it, belonging to the Counterculture Network, but um, it's there's a lot of, just like you said, legwork, and I hate social media as it is, and I don't want to be on it, and I'm like, damn, I gotta do a better job of like posting and all that sort of stuff, because that in itself, you working 8 to 5 today and then now coming on for an interview and having kids and all that sort of stuff, like those are essentially 3 full-time jobs. You know what I mean? Promoting your book, doing interviews to get it out there, spreading your story with the awareness, and yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. You just actually got an award, didn't you, for your full-time job recently? For your contract, being a contractor.
I don't.
You were contractor of the year. Is that what I heard on the interview? It might not have been recently, but
Oh no. That was a couple years ago. Yeah, that was a
okay,
couple years ago. Yeah, yeah. That was for a previous job I had. I was building homes for a large home builder, and yeah, I ended up being the construction manager of the year my first year with the company.
nice.
And I was like ranked like number one nationwide, and that was kind of part of like being successful as an adult, I guess.
Oh, I would say you got that, like the overall award. Yeah, it's a big success.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess like I mean that was kind of like my, at the time it seemed like validation, I guess.
Hmm.
It's like you just kind of feel like you've accomplished the thing. So yeah, that's what that was.
Nice, nice. So that's I did a little bit of contracting, and my dad was a full time plumber growing up, and he would bring me on different job sites, and I learned that I didn't want to be a plumber,
Yeah,
and now I'm kind of kicking myself not having paid attention more, because obviously it's like you can make a small fortune doing that sort of stuff, and yeah, no, that's good. So you want to promote your book? It's called Strength Beyond Courage.
strength beyond the shadows.
Be saying sorry, my apologize about
Yeah.
that. Strength Beyond the Shadows, and it is a story that is not for it is, I guess, for little kids in awareness in a certain sort of setting, but it can be quite quite difficult for people to hear that. Have you, while you've been promoting your story or getting it out there and doing speaking engagements, has anyone ever come up to you and talked about their own sort of story or anything like that?
Oh yeah, man. Oh man, I've gotten so many messages, emails, DMs, comments, in person. Whenever I speak in person, typically when I do in person engagements, I won't get too many people approaching me. And I think there's an interesting reason why. It's probably because like, um, if you go and watch like a first responder or some combat veteran, wounded veteran, something like that speak, and that guy gets done speaking, and there's a line of 10 guys, and they're all crying, and they're all wanting to get up there and hug this guy and shake his hand. You could probably make the assumption, not that you should assume, but you could probably, I would say most people look at the people in that line like, oh, they probably served, or they've probably been wounded, or they probably lost somebody in combat. There's like this like air of like honor and pride and something that's like kind of respectful and admirable about why these men might be emotional. But with the context of my story, whenever I share my story on a stage, especially if anybody in that crowd gets emotional, you can imagine the pressure they probably feel from people around them looking at them like, why is this person emotional? Well, this person's probably emotional because they've gone through the same things that I have. And
Right.
nothing that I've gone through, especially as a child, is admirable or honorable, or like, I'm not proud of anything that I've been through. I'm happy and proud that I've gotten through it, but nobody would say, I don't think anybody would say that they're proud of the things that happened to them, as far as it relates to me. And so when I speak in person, there's this interesting thing where I usually will get one or two people who will come up and speak, or maybe I mean the last one that I did in Baltimore,
Hmm.
I had about 7 or 8 people in line who came up and really talked to me quite a bit, and two or three of them could relate. But yeah, for the most part, in person conferences, the interaction with the audience is pretty limited, for now, anyways. I don't know what will happen in the future, but and I'm not upset about that. That's just the nature of it, right? When, like I said, you approach somebody as a veteran or as a first responder or any other kind of story, pretty much it's not as shameful or embarrassing. But when you approach me and people see you crying and people see hugging and things like that, it can feel like, everybody's looking at you like, oh, like he's been through it too. It happened to him too. And so, that's the funny thing about, well, not the funny thing, but that's the nice thing about, I guess, emails and DMs is all of these people can come to me in silence. And I mean,
Right.
it sucks that it's in silence. Like, it sucks that they feel like they can't just say things.
Right.
And I mean, there's a whole nother rabbit hole you could go down with that. But I mean, most people don't just speak their opinion out loud. I try to be that person I'm not really scared to say what I need to say. I think there's a time and a place for most things, but nonetheless, that's what the internet has offered, is people to be able to come to me through DMs and emails, and I get a lot of those. I get them every single day.
Yeah, I bet. Do you have anything come up in the New England area? Any speaking engagements that you know of up here?
No, I don't. I don't have anything right now. Um, yeah, no.
'Cause I'd love to attend just to officially meet you and hear your story, just how you speak of it and all of that. And what was the initial like catalyst that made you want to get your story out there?
So this is like a like faceted question, I get, or stage question maybe. There were
Kind of an unfair
multiple.
one. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Is it kind of an unfair one? I'm sorry.
No, no. I mean, it's a great question. I guess it's just there were multiple things in my life that happened that made me want to be the person that I am, and I'll try to, kind of a long story, but first off, when I was 10, I had this moment where I walked in my house and my mom was smoking weed with a bunch of people. There was like 8 or 9 people, but my older sister was smoking with them,
Hmm.
and she wouldn't have been older than 11 or 12 years old, and she's in a room passing a blunt with a bunch of adults. And so when that happened, I can remember looking in that living room and thinking to myself, like, I'll never be like that. I'll never live this life. Like, I'll never do drugs. I'll never, like, I'm going to do something special with my life. And I mean, at this point, I was already being abused. I'd been around drugs and violence enough, and I just knew that I was going to be something special. And so I knew that one day that I'd write a book. I mean, at 10 years old, I knew that I was either going to write a book or, I don't know, be in a movie. I knew something was going to happen where I'd be able to like tell my story to help other people because I knew I was going through some crazy shit. And so,
You didn't think you'd be writing like a nonfiction book. You knew you were going to write a story about your life at some point in time.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I remember being there and just thinking like, one of these days I'm going to tell this, like, because I knew something, I knew that things weren't normal. I knew things weren't right
Right.
in my house. And so I think part of that too was I had read a book called A Child Called It, and
Hmm.
I think that's like a classic that a lot of people read. And so when I read that book,
Not me. I'm sorry. Back then, I think I've finished like a total 4 books in my life, like from front to back. I've read a lot, but not like from front to back, and that wasn't one of them, unfortunately.
yeah, so A Child Called It it's actually a really, really crazy story, but it's about a guy who writes about his childhood. He was abused severely by his mother, and it's just this
Okay.
really crazy story. And I read that, and when I read that, I was like, oh, like I know what this is like, And
Yeah.
so maybe that was part of it. But anyways, a couple years later, my mom was kind of taken away. I ended up at my grandparents' house at some point, and I remember watching a YouTube video and seeing a motivational speaker. His name's Eric Thomas.
Yep.
I watched him speak, and when I watched him speak, it just fired me up. And I heard him tell a story. He was, homeless, no father, eating out of trash cans, kind of thing, and it fired me up. And I was like, oh, so I'm going to write a book one day. And then now the thing that was in my head was I'm going to be a motivational speaker one day. Because I was like, if this guy can get up and share his story, like I can get up and share mine. Like my story is very heavy, and I think one day it's going to be very inspiring. And so, as a child, those two moments happen that kind of like put this like 100-meter target in my head of like one of these days I'll do this.
Hmm.
And then just a couple years ago, I guess about a year and a half ago, I saw an interview on Soft White Underbelly, which I'd never seen the channel before, but I came across his name's Clark Fredericks, and
Okay.
he's from New Jersey, and he's a man who was unfortunately he was like brutally raped when he was, I think, 12 years old by another man in his community, and this man was like a police chief. He was a Boy Scout leader. He was a high member in the church, so he's very well known in the community. And this guy ends up raping Clark at like 12 years old, and Clark
Man,
lives his
fucking
whole life.
that just irritates me. The fact that he's a cop and doing that. I
Yeah.
mean, that just as being one that's yeah, infuriating. Go ahead. Sorry.
Dude, if you're a cop, man, you should look this one up. It's crazy, bro.
Yeah.
It's like his name is Dennis Pegg, and
Okay.
he would take boys home from the jail at night to like mentor them, and he was just sexually abusing them.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy. It's a crazy story. And so Clark goes his whole life, like becomes an alcoholic, uses drugs, just kind of living this life of like anger and misery. And like 30 years later, he comes across Dennis Pegg again. Some things happen, and he ends up murdering him a couple days later. Goes in his house, goes in the living room, stabs him to death, and then goes to prison. He was going to be sentenced to a life sentence. The town kind of came out and protested it because they
Good.
knew that the guy was abusing kids, and Clark was the first one to say something. And so Clark's testimony is actually on YouTube. You can look all this up. It's on YouTube. It's really, really cool. Anyways, I saw Clark on Soft Red Underbelly, and Clark talks about this whole situation, and he was the first man that I'd ever seen talk about this happening to him, but also in such a raw and like truthful way. He does not hold back at all when he speaks and he tells his story. And that's how I am now. And I wouldn't be telling my story the way that I do if it was for Clark. And so I saw him about a year and a half ago tell his story. And I had always told people like little bits and pieces of my story, but I'd
Hmm.
never told them that I was sexually abused. I've never said that out loud. Like I would never tell that to anybody. I was always like scared of saying that,
Hmm.
especially because my story is it's very, very dark. But when I saw Clark share his story like that was my like final catalyst, I guess you could say, the final point as an adult where I was like, okay, like I gotta start speaking. I gotta start talking because Clark was such a massive impact on me. Like, imagine the impact that I could have on the world if I just opened up my mouth.
Right. Right. When you said it didn't start at 10 years old, but it started because obviously I've listened to you talking on other interviews. It started before 10, right?
So like so I mean, a lot of things happened.
Hmm.
5 years old, I was molested by a babysitter's teenage son. When I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, my mom started to get more abusive physically, emotionally, verbally. And then by the time I was 10, 11 years old, my mom was addicted to crack and cocaine. And around 10 years old is when I met, his name was Armando Vasquez. We called him Mondo. But that's when I was about 10 years old. That's when I met him.
Hmm.
And he was in his 30s. He was like maybe 31, 32, 33, something like that. And that's when I met him. And then he sexually abused me for almost 6 years, up until I was about a month away from being 16.
Wow. Wow. And what did anything ever come of him? Was he convicted of anything? I mean, we can get into your story right now if you want. I'm kind of asking questions that are on the top of my head at the moment. But um, was he ever convicted of anything?
Yeah. So what happened was, he he would make comments. It's kind of crazy. We had these other adult friends that we would hang out with over the
Hmm.
years, and we'd go to their houses and like watch football and play video games and whatever, card games, hang out. And he would always make these comments towards these adults whenever it was time to leave, because I would always hang out with him on the weekends, Friday nights, Saturday nights. And he would make these comments towards these other adults like, hey, we got to go. It's time for Seth to go and do this tonight, or I'm going to go back and do this to Seth. And he's making all these references to basically abusing me. And I mean, just like very bold comments, like literally, we got to go back so I can go fuck Seth, or Seth's going to blow me tonight. And he would say this around other adults, and these other adults would just kind of laugh it off. And so
Did
I,
they not think he was like? Did they not think he was serious?
right, it's just the way predators operate. They operate in plain sight.
Yeah.
They don't. The less that they have to hide, the more comfortable they are. Right, the more they can get away with. So in a weird way, he's telling on himself, but he's protecting himself at the same time.
Right.
It's like saying, I'm going to go to the bathroom and do some coke. It's like, no, you're not. And so everybody kind of just like, yeah, whatever. It's
You
just,
actually go to the bathroom and then start blowing lines.
yeah. So it's like their way of like just hiding in plain sight. You're going to say something so outlandish that everybody knows you're just fucking around. And so that's what he would do. And then I would kind of be sitting there, and as a child, you're kind of wanting somebody to probably speak up and say something,
Right.
because what he's doing when they do it around the victim, they're silencing that victim,
Hmm.
because they're basically saying, look around. Nobody in this room believes that I'm going to go back and do this. That's basically what they're saying. And so we'd go back to his house or his apartment or whatever, and he would abuse me. And so this was going on for, like 6 years. And one weekend I'm up at his house, and I've got a younger friend with me, and he had made one of those comments about my younger friend.
Hmm.
So when he made that comment to my younger friend, we laughed it off in the room, but I knew he was serious. Like, I knew something was going on. And later that night, my younger friend goes back to his bed, and that was the first time that I'd ever seen another kid go back to his bed. So
I'm just
I
right.
just
Sorry.
couldn't.
Go ahead. I'm just
I'm
writing down a
sorry.
question I'm writing down a question that I have for you later. So that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So when he went back there, I couldn't like stomach seeing it happen to somebody else, and
Right.
so I went home that weekend and I reported him. And when I reported him, I told my grandparents. We called the police. We go down to the hospital. We do the rape kit. This officer walks in, Chad Couples. He's from Bluffton, Ohio. He comes in, and he kind of does the forensic interview. And we sit down and we talk, and I tell Chad like the worst of the worst. I tell him the most disgusting things that I could think of at the time. as much as I could tell him. I just knew that I was going to get the guy. Like I knew that it was my time, my turn, and I was gonna get this guy. I was not going to let him get away with it. And so, um, yeah, that was we left the hospital. I went home, and Chad drove up to Bluffton, like 30 minutes away. He arrested Mondo, took him to the police station, convinced him to go without arresting him. So he got an out of custody confession,
Yeah.
which is a big deal.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
yeah, and so and Chad tells this whole story, and it's so cool because he's like, you know, he sits down with him and he's like, "Hey, so tell me about yourself," and the guy's like, Mondo, whatever. And Chad's like, "You like video games?" The guy's like, "Yeah, what kind of video games?" "Oh, this and that." And he's like, "Oh, wow, tell me about that. Tell me about that." 10 or 15 minutes of talking, Mondo's like, "What are we doing here? Like, what's going on?" And Chad says, "Well, Seth, we talked to Seth today, and he said that there has been some like inappropriate things going on between you two." And Mondo initially throws his hands up and says, "No, no, no, like I wouldn't do that. Like I'm not gay." Da 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 da. And Chad says, "Hey man, like I didn't say you were gay. He's like, "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No." "Do you have a wife?" "No." He's like, "Well, everybody has needs."
Right.
And so he kind of keeps going at Mondo. I can't remember exactly what he says now. He's told me the whole story. It's cool. But after a few minutes, I think he says, "Well, Seth said this and this happened." And then Mondo asks for a drink of water. And as soon as he does it, Chad, when he's telling the story, he like slams the table because he knows they got him.
Yeah.
As soon as he asks for the glass of water, his like throat's getting dry. He's ready to say something.
Yeah.
So they're like, "All right, go get the water." Boom. They bring him a glass of water, and he admits to like one or two things, like very minimal in reality versus what he had actually done. So he admits a little bit. They arrest him. They take him into custody. They arrest him and they take him down to the county. Put him in jail, and then he was charged with 11 felony counts, and then they offered him a plea deal, and he was sentenced to 4 felony counts. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Okay.
So he
Awesome.
abused me and another kid and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He abused us for about 10 years in total between the two of
No,
us.
I think that should have been at least I say that half-heartedly. I mean, sometimes it's hard with the system, like the criminal justice system. It can be extremely difficult to obtain even a conviction in that sort of stuff. And the fact I'm happy that they obtained one, and he deserved at the very least life in prison.
Yeah, it's actually interesting talking to you're a cop or SWAT.
Yep.
What do you do?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Been
So
almost 15 years. Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting talking to you about it because you've got a little bit more insight on these things, and it's even better actually. I'll tell you this, and the like survivor or victim world of things, especially of sexual violence or assault. Um, for every story or every comment that I get that's like, "I'm so thankful for you. You're so brave." I probably get 5 that say, "The police didn't listen to me. Nobody believed me. The police screwed me. The police didn't investigate it." This is like they're just attacking the police officers and the justice system. And although the justice system certainly, has some flaws and maybe needs improvement here and there, um, I always try to like get this point across to people that these police officers, they are just human beings. They have the same blood and brains that we have, and they have an insurmountable job. Like there are so many problems in the world, and they just can't fix them all. They fix as many as they possibly can, and they can't fix them all. And when you're talking about sexual abuse and trauma, like those things are very complicated. And so you have this problem where the police do one thing wrong, and so then it's defund the police. Well, since the police don't have money, now they can't get the proper training. So
Right.
now we're just perpetuating this cycle of like we can't fix the fuck. So when the police mess up, if they ever mess up, which I'm
Which we
sure they
do. I
do.
mean, I've messed up numerous times. I own my mistakes, but like, it's all about when if it doesn't affect somebody like physically or financially or something like that. If you, as long as you own your mistake and you learn from it, great. You know what I mean? Like that's hey, that's what we do as humans. We do as adults. That's how I learn. I make mistakes and I learn from them. But like you said, you fund them, then you defund them, and now you're funding them again. Like you said, perpetuating the cycle of like they need more training. We need more training. That's how we get better. And then you're taking it away from us, but trying to essentially force us to do training, but then defunding it at the same time, which I've seen it happen. It's kind of ridiculous. I did have like were the when sorry to interrupt you and cut you off, but yes, I do agree with you. Like were the cops called like when you were prior to 10 years old? Were they called to your house for like
Oh,
like different things that were going on?
yeah, man. I mean, dude. I mean,
What
I
year?
can remember.
What year was that? Like just right about.
It would have been like 2000, 2000, 2001,
Okay,
2002. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the police were called to the schools, or at least Child Protective Services,
Hmm.
CPS. We interviewed with them at the schools a lot, but we were brainwashed at a very young age to just lie to them and say like, hey, it's none of your business. What happens in our house stays in our house. It's none of your business.
Right.
So we it didn't matter who showed up. We would just protect our home. That's all we knew. But there were there were times where like there was twice where my house was broken into or attempted when I was 10 years old, and the police were called. They showed up. They called my mom home from work because she would go to work at night. She'd work through the night while we were asleep, and my mom would come home and they would tell the police like, hey, this happened. And I don't remember the exact conversations. I don't, but I back in the house and went back to sleep and then went to school the next day. Like there was no
Right.
follow up. There was no like therapy. There was no like, hey, are you guys sure you're okay? Like there was none of that.
Was it for drug activity? Is that why? Like I assume that the like you said there was some sort of drug activity going on inside the house, and then there's a break in. Typically, I mean that's what that's what I would think as a cop. Like it's going to be for drugs or something like that. That's why it happened. And I'm surprised that. Well, you said DC. Well, I'm used to calling it DCYF or DCS or whatever it's called in your particular state, but like they're involved in your life and in interviewing all you guys. And I'm were you ever removed from the house at any point in time because of at least the drug activity or something?
Never. Yeah,
Really? That's
never. Yeah.
interesting. I mean, given the time of like early 2000s, I started in 2010, so obviously wasn't around then for that. But I can say nowadays, depending on the state that you live in and their laws, there's a chance that you're going to get removed from the house and at least go stay with, at the bare minimum, another family member while things are getting sorted out. That's how I see it in 2025. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just
It's,
kind of
it's,
shocking that they never did that for you guys.
it's crazy, man. I'm telling you, like it's crazy. And I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know why we weren't taken away. Um, I don't know why it was crazy. Like, it was just crazy, man. Like, I don't understand. And this was back in, early 2000s when smoking weed was like
Felony
real
level.
criminal,
Yeah.
like you were, so it was
You get
like,
a joint, you're going to prison for 3 to 5.
yeah, exactly, dude. Like, it's crazy. And so, like, it was just nothing ever happened, man. And even when my mom was taken away, the day she was taken away from us, she had stabbed her boyfriend over some drugs, set his stuff on fire in the front yard. The police show up, throw her in the back of the car. They take off with her. There's another officer there, and like we're all in the house. And this officer is basically like, "What are we doing with the kids?" And my dad showed up out of nowhere. And this is like a real big long story. I'm telling it very quickly,
No,
but
go ahead.
my dad takes us away like 30, 40 minutes away, and that was it. Like, takes us away. We go to a new school, and there was no like chain of custody, like no chain of like, hey, make sure these kids are being looked after. It was just like gone.
Some sort of fucking follow up. That's what we call it. Like, hey, like at least like get DCS involved and go over there for the
Yeah,
next couple of days, get some sort of like parenting. I don't.
dude, it was
Yeah.
nothing. What's even crazier after that is I ended up leaving my dad's house. because I kept getting in trouble at school. So I went back to the city. So when I went back to the city, I was living with my aunt and my uncle. And then I lived with them for about a month or two, and they were having a new baby. So they were like, hey, you got to go find somewhere else to live. I was 12 years old. And they're like, hey, you got to go find somewhere else to live. So then I move in with some other random people, and I move in with some other people after that. So I
Just
moved
couch
around like,
surfing at 12.
I'm sorry.
Just couch surfing at 12.
Yeah, dude. I mean, seriously. And this whole time, like I'm calling the schools and I'm telling them like, hey, I got to transfer. I got to move over here. Like I got to go to this different school now. And dude, I don't know how, like, I don't know how this was happening. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know how I didn't get picked up. I don't know how like somebody just didn't come to the school and say like, "Hey, you're coming with us. You're going to foster care. You're going to the system." Like none of that ever happened. It's a miracle that I say that it is, but maybe it's not.
Did you like
Because
school at that age? Did you like going to it? And like, was it kind of like a relief from your normal, like everyday household sort of thing?
yeah, so school was definitely an escape for me. It was a place where it was warm and safe. I had food. I was very smart. I was a straight A student. I mean, I was like very very smart. I didn't have to study, didn't have to pay attention, and I could just kill everything. I've always been a very well, not as much now in my adulthood, my brain has slowed down, but as a young man, dude, I was very, very smart, even through college. So
I can't memorize shit nowadays, so I get it. It's like you're trying to delete like lyrics from like songs that back in the mid 2000s out of your head.
yeah,
Like, I need that room for other stuff. Like, my wife told me to go get something at the Stop and Shop or the grocery market. It's like, yeah, I forgot. I got to call her and find out what it is. So I get it. Yeah, it's well, that's good. I mean, because it seems like that was your escape. It surprised me. I mean, if you're like misbehaving in school, like that's like one of the signs that like something's going on, and you need like some sort of services to help you out, like at school. That's like one of the things that they tell teachers or guidance counselors of this kid's misbehaving. Well, why is he misbehaving? You know what I mean? And but like obviously you're you know doing well in school at that point in time. Did you and it's kind of going back to you said the officer when you initially reported everything to him, his name was Chad, right?
yeah, Chad Couples, yep.
You remained I say close, but like friendly with him?
Not since the reporting. So it's kind of interesting. Oh man, me and Chad, we have a crazy story. So his wife was my teacher when I was in like fourth or fifth grade,
Okay.
and Chad served in the National Guard. He went to Iraq and Afghanistan. And when he came back from there, his wife, my teacher, would bring him into the classroom, and we would talk about like Afghanistan and Iraq. He'd talk about the war and his deployments and things like that for history. And so I had actually seen Chad before the day I met him in the hospital. So when he showed up in the hospital, I was like, oh shit, like I know this guy. Like I've seen him before.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw his last name and I was like, hey, is your wife, Mrs. Couples? And he's like, yeah, that's my wife. And I was like, oh, she was my teacher. So I remember seeing Chad, and so that was kind of like we had this like commonality. We kind of had this like little bit of like a rapport as soon as he had walked in, which is
Mm-hmm.
good. And then after that day in the hospital, I never saw him again. Never saw him
Really?
again
Okay.
for that was almost 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then earlier in 2024, when I finally committed to writing my book, I had to reach out. Like I have always like looked for him, but then I've stopped because I don't want to find him. I don't want to get too close.
I
Um,
get it.
I found his wife, and then I messaged his wife on Facebook, but she never responded. So I was just like, all right, I'll just leave it alone because like I don't want to piss somebody off. Like I don't want to bring up bad trauma. Like I don't. Maybe this guy doesn't give a fuck about me. I didn't know. So I was just scared. I was scared to find him. So I would like type in his name, but then I wouldn't go any further.
Yeah.
And but earlier in 2024, I was like, no, dude, I'm writing this book. I got to find him. And so this is kind of a funny story. I called the police station that he worked for in Bluffton,
Yeah.
Ohio, and they're like, yeah, he hasn't worked here in years. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, does anybody have contact with him? Can you try to reach out to him and just let him know who is reaching out? And all I want to do is just say thank you. And they're like, sure. I'm like, all right, whatever. They're not going to do it. So I get off the phone. I call the county. I'm looking for him. And then I get off the phone. I looked him up on LinkedIn. I saw that he worked for our local college. So I called the college. And when I called the college, I'm speaking to the security office, and he's an RSO now, a resource or a school SRO, school resource officer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I called the office, he gets the call on his radio, but he just listens to it, And so I'm on the phone. I'm like, hey, this is, my name is Seth Gehle, and I'm looking for Chad Couples. I think he's an officer there. I'm not really sure, but I'm just trying to find him. He investigated one of my cases like 15 years ago. And I didn't know this at the time, but Chad was listening to that call, and he's like, what the fuck? And as that's happening, he gets a text from those other police stations where they're like, hey, this guy is looking for you. So Chad's thinking to himself, like, what the fuck happened? Like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And so they're like, all right, well, we'll give your information to Chad. So a couple hours go by, and I get a phone call, and it's Chad. And I answer the phone. I'm like, hello? He's like, hey, this is Chad Couples. I'm like, holy shit, dude. And I'm just like, I don't even know what to say, bro. I'm like freaking just like, holy shit. And so I said, hey, my name is Seth Gehle. I was like, I don't know if you remember me. And he said, he's like, fuck yeah, I remember you, man. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but he tells me, he's like, you're the first and only sexual assault case that I had ever had. And I was like, oh, damn. And so he remembered me, and then he's like, so I started telling him, I said, man, I just wanted to call you and let you know that like, I'm okay now. And like, I'm doing really good. And I've got a wife and a couple kids, and I've done really good in my career. I joined the Army, I served in the military for like 9 years. And, we just had this, like, me and Chad have a lot of similarities in our lives, and kind of who we are. And so he's like, that's incredible, this and that. And so I asked him on the phone, I said, hey, I'm writing this book now, and I just wanted to ask you, like, would you be willing to sit down for an interview just so I can get your point of view of that day? I just want to know what happened from your eyes on that day. I was like, do you remember that day? He's like, yeah, dude. He's like, I remember everything. He's like, whatever you need, bro, I got you.
That's fucking awesome.
Dude, it was incredible, bro. And so I drove up to Ohio like a month later and freaking showed up at the local news station and sat down with him for like 2 hours, and we kind of talked. And he told me the entire day. And it's kind of funny, when the interview started, I was recording it on my phone, and I said, all right, just start from the beginning. Like, you put your boots on, and then what,
Yeah.
And so he kind of gives the rundown, and he tells me when he gets to the hospital, he's like, I sit down with Seth and I start to interview him, and then we kind of finish up the interview. And I said, well, hold on. I said, I want you to tell me every detail that you remember, like everything that was said.
Yeah.
And so he kind of spills some of the details that I had said to him that I forgot that I had said. I totally forgot that I mentioned those things in the hospital. And it was so visceral. It was like a very disgusting kind of detail, very, very nasty like moment that happened to me when I was younger.
Yeah.
That I almost stopped the interview. I was almost like, okay, like, never mind. Like, I don't want to do this. But I was like, no, like, we're going to go into this dark water. We're going to find out what's in there, and then we're going to freaking get over this shit, And so I'll wrap this up with Chad now. I interviewed him. I go home, and it was incredible. And then I get a call a few months later, and they're like, hey, we have this conference in Lima, Ohio, my hometown. Do you want to speak at it? And I said, I will speak at this conference under one condition. I said, I want to present Chad Couples an award. And the lady's like, she's like, tell me more. So I tell her the whole story, and she's like, holy shit. She's like, yes, let's go. And so
that's great.
The first conference that I've ever spoke at was in my hometown. Like, it's just this like real beautiful moment, First conference I ever speak at, I go back to my hometown, and I, deliver the speech, kind of get some tears in the audience. People are a little emotional. And then, usually when I tell my story, I really focus on Chad because he's very important to me.
Hmm.
And it's a very important part of the story. But when I told my story that day, I just glossed over the fact that this officer was there, and Chad is at the conference. He's watching the whole thing go down. So I glossed over it. And I know Chad was in his head thinking like, oh, thank God he didn't fucking talk about me. And at the end, I said, there's this police officer I talk about in my story. And I said, his name's Chad Couples. And he stood up in the crowd. And then I'm getting a little emotional now talking about it. But, um, he kind of comes around the front of the stage, and I just broke down and I just cried and cried. And Chad comes up, and I couldn't talk, and he comes up and gives me a hug. And I'm like, he's just holding me in his arms, and I'm hugging him and just crying and thanking him. And he's like so fucking proud of me. And he's just telling me that, how proud of me he is. And then, I presented him with like a custom made blue line flag with a plaque as well. And the flag has like a little burnt end picture of a police officer kneeling down for like a little boy, and the flag as well. And so that was like my payment back to Chad, which isn't enough. And I say this a lot for like the people that have helped me in my life. There's no payment or words that I can say that could express how much like Chad means to me. So the only thing I can do from this point forward is take action and continue to save other people, And so that's the reason why I tell my story. That's the reason why I tell it the way I do. That's the reason why Chad is a big part of my story. It's very emotional. It was a really, really cool moment though, to get to go back and see that officer who helped me out, 15 years ago.
Yeah, that is a really cool moment, and I can only imagine what his, like, other than like the initial shock by getting a call from you and then learning about your story, all that sort of stuff. Have you guys ever been asked to like do a interview together, like on a podcast or like anything on YouTube or anything like that?
No, nobody's come out and asked us yet. I would love to, like, I'd love to like, I have a few ideas of kind of what I want to do, and we'll, possibly swing those, maybe in the future sometime. I've got a big idea that I've got, so I've got a few ideas, and if Chad ever comes across this, just know that I've got some things cooking. Because
so when I start
ahead.
plugging it on Instagram, I'll start advertising right in that specific area so he can hear it and and listen to the interview, so he sees that he's
Right.
planning, that you're planning something for him.
Yeah.
That's really cool though. I mean, the fact that you presented him with an award and he had him there at that speaking engagement. You said that was in your hometown, right?
Yep.
Like where you grew up and everything. Did you know anybody? And I assume you do. And it's a dumb question because it's your hometown. And if somebody knows Seth, hey, Seth's talking, like, what's he going to talk about? Let's go. I assume you knew people that were in the crowd, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So there were probably 100 people there.
Okay.
And I think I knew, there's probably maybe a little more than that. Maybe I probably knew 5 or 6 people in the crowd.
Just from like growing up, like kind of casually. Did they know the story at all?
No, they didn't know the story. 2 of the people they're basically, I would consider like pretty much like my parents now. They took me in my senior year and kind of helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like 2 of my teachers and like another random, onesies and twosies here and there. But I really didn't know anybody. But what's crazy is I did advertise and market that like I was going to my hometown. I told everybody that I grew up with, all these people that had me on Facebook and social media that were following me. A bunch of people were like, oh, like, yeah, we'll come out and see you. And nobody showed up. So, which, it's interesting when you start doing what I'm doing, you would think that like everybody in your immediate circle would support the hell out of you, or everybody that knows you would support the hell out of you. Like, like, for example, the book, right? You would think that everybody that I knew personally would buy a copy of the book just to support me, right? And then write a review. Like, this should almost go unasked. It seems that way, and it's just not the case. Like, people just and for a long time. Well, no, I say for a long time. probably for a week or two, that kind of sat with me in like a weird way where I was kind of like, man, like what the fuck? But I had to change my thought on that. Like I had to change my mindset on that of like, I don't I don't deserve anything special. So, I'm not going to go to my hometown and think that just because it's Seth, like everybody's going to show up. That's and I went there thinking that, and so I had this like
Yeah.
bad kind of mentality about it. So at first I was a little sour, but it is. I'm not upset about it anymore.
Did the 5 or 6 people that like knew you, were they shocked about what you were talking about? I assume you don't
Um,
hold it back when it's. I assume it's kind of a rated R sort of speaking engagement. Am I wrong in saying that or no?
I'm not. I wasn't as raw. Like whenever I speak to a crowd, I'm not as detailed.
Okay.
But I also don't. I mean, I'd let them know what happened for sure.
Yeah.
Now, and everybody that was there, I think they knew my story, um,
Okay.
to some extent. Maybe not, maybe not as detailed as I told it, but I think they kind of had an idea of what I had gone through.
Okay. All right. Well, it's.
And this
I
was
mean,
this was a behavioral health conference as well. So, like everybody there was social workers and things like that. So they were all kind of used to this stuff.
when you initially reported it to the chat and going through the process of like the court system and all that sort of stuff, and how old were you again? Was it 16? You said you were when
Yeah,
you
yeah. I
reported
was
it.
I was like a month away from being 16.
Was your mother involved in your life at that point in time?
Not really. No, not really. She got visitation, and I would see her. I don't know, maybe once a month on the weekend
Okay.
for a couple hours. But
It's, was she aware of what was going on?
no, nobody was. No.
Nothing at all.
Yeah,
Nothing at
even
all.
when I reported, like nobody knew because I was a minor, and so it was all. They couldn't say my name. They couldn't put my
Yeah.
name anywhere, so nothing happened.
Did they make you go through any sort of like counseling?
So that's an interesting thing. No, they didn't force me to do anything. My grandparents took me to a psychologist like once or twice,
Hmm.
but nobody like really hammered that I should go see therapy or crime victim services. Like none of that ever
Wow.
happened for me. I literally reported the guy. Like, I think I went back to the hospital or to the police station one time to talk to Chad one more time, and that was it. I mean, I
Oh
didn't go to
shit.
court. I
Wow.
didn't. I didn't see it. I didn't. Nothing happened. Nobody showed up. Nobody talked to me. I mean, I literally reported. I think I went back and talked to Chad for like 15 minutes to write like a little letter, like a report, which I actually have. I actually have the handwritten note or the handwritten
Like your statement
statement.
and all that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually have that, which is fucking crazy to see, the handwritten pieces of it. I have all of Chad's notes as well. Like I have the whole police case report file and all that, which is really cool. But anyways, um, um, yeah, man, I like nothing ever happened, and I just kind of kept it moving. Just you
How
know,
big is the area that you were growing up in, like population wise?
Lima's like 38,000, 40,000 people.
So it's not. I mean, it's not small. You know what I mean? It's not 2,000 people or anything like that. It's not, and it's
Right.
obviously not. It's not like New York City, L.A. or Boston or Cincinnati. It's like I mean they've had to have some sort of services that you should have
Yeah.
gone
Dude,
through. Or at
it's
least nowadays, you definitely
yeah.
would have been like, they would have asked you about 45 times that hey, you want to go see counseling, to the point where like, hey, we're going to take you to the, even if you don't want to go, especially being that age. Did you have like, who was your like your guardian kind of supporting you through that process?
I lived with my grandparents at the time.
So they were
Yeah.
like the ones that were just kind of like supporting you and staying with them, everything.
Yeah, but I mean, dude, truthfully, like I reported him, and my immediate thoughts were like, what am I going to do this weekend? Like I don't know what
Well,
to
you're
do.
16 years old too. I mean, so I do get that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I wasn't. I mean, I know that this happens to people, and then they're like down in the dumps, and then maybe they're self harming, or I had my suicidal ideation for sure.
Hmm.
But I like never questioned my sexuality. I wasn't like going through some crazy phase. I mean, I was at the fairgrounds a couple days later chasing girls. Like I was like
Yeah.
whatever. I was like, I'm good, man. Like it's not a big deal. So from the outside, I can imagine looking at me. They're like, okay, he's fine. Like he's fine. And I was fine for the time being, but those things kind of caught up with me later in life, not in a super bad way, but bad enough, where I certainly should have gotten help when I was younger. But, from the outside looking in, yeah, Seth was good to go. I mean, I was wrestling, I was hanging out with my friends and girls on the weekends now.
Mhm.
Like, I was good to go. I was still a straight A student, like I was from the outside in. Yeah, you wouldn't think that this kid was believe it. In fact, that I had gone through what I had gone through because of how well I was doing.
How did it catch up with you later on in life?
Um, Kind of weird. I went to I joined the army when I was 17, and I joined purely like out of a identity issue. I wanted this like title, I wanted this identity, I wanted this like persona.
Mhm.
So I joined because of that, and then after a couple years, so I joined the reserves, and then after like 2 or 3 years, I joined active duty. So I go active duty.
Yeah.
I joined the infantry, and when I joined the infantry, I was like full on like America mode. Like I was actually like very proud to be an American and like very proud to serve. And I did that for I was in the infantry for 6 years, and while I was in the infantry, I was really struggling with my like identity because I was like this man. I was in the infantry. I was with other men trying to run and gun people, and I just had this past of being sexually abused by a man.
Mhm.
And so I just when you're and this being a police officer, like when you're in that freaking locker room or the ready room or whatever, and you're with all the boys, like there's some freaking killers in there, man. There's some tough dudes in there, some hardcore guys. And so, you know, you would never expect those guys to ever have any problems. Like you just
Yeah.
look at them like they're invincible. And so I was a team leader, I was a rough and tough guy. I was strong. I was a team leader. I was a big dude. Um, so I didn't want anybody to know that what I had been through because I thought that it would make me like, you know, invalid or just not worthy. And so
Yeah.
I really struggled there. Um, I
Was it
throughout
starting to like just boil up inside you and you wanted to get it out in some sort of way?
the yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would be in rooms with people and I just couldn't talk. Like I didn't fit in with these people. Like I didn't come from where these people had come from. Like I had been through some things that I wasn't proud of, and like you just feel like you're wearing a mask almost, and you just don't want to take it off because if people see you, like they're not going to like you. So
Yeah.
you just don't hang out with people. I was by myself a lot. As far as girls go, like I was very sexually motivated. Ended up meeting my now wife, and we got married real quick. Got attached, got very very serious, and we got married within 6 months of knowing each other.
Wow.
um, yeah, we had our first child a year and a half into our relationship, and it just our marriage was really good for the first year or two, and then it kind of started to get kind of bad because of all my childhood trauma. I became like very emotionally like abusive in a way,
Okay.
just controlling and just manipulative and just kind of doing the wrong things as a husband. Just I was just a real turd of a husband basically. Um, and then I went to Afghanistan, came back from Afghanistan, and and the with the combination of going to Afghanistan and then I was getting out of the military, which is very stressful. And then I had just watched the R. Kelly documentary, and like those three things in combination kind of sent me down a really bad path. When I watched the R. Kelly doc, it brought back a lot of my childhood trauma, which I'd never really forgotten. But it just when I watched that documentary, it really helped me understand what was going on. But it made me think about my childhood a lot, and it made me think about the way that I had treated women and the way that I had treated my wife, and I just felt horrible. And so then I got in a really, really, really dark hole. And I mean, I was as close to killing myself as I have ever been. I had my son, who was a newborn baby at the time, and I mean, I remember sitting on a couch at 2 in the morning while he's crying, and just thinking about taking my life and taking his life. I mean, I've had the worst thoughts that you can have. And that was all from my childhood trauma, just not being just unresolved, just
Hmm.
scared of it, just terrified of it. I mean, I was married and I had in-laws that I couldn't talk to because they didn't understand me, and I
Yeah.
just, you just feel like you got like all this pressure on your chest, and it just hurts, man. And after a while, it will get you if you don't figure it out.
What? I mean, that's tough. You hear the fact that you have like a 2-month-old baby, and I can't imagine those thoughts at all. Like it's definitely a stressful like event. Did you go to Afghanistan and come back, and the baby was too? Like, was he born while you were deployed or anything like that?
So I left for Afghanistan, and we just had my daughter. My
Okay,
my grandmother passed away while I was gone. Oddly enough, she passed away at the same time. My abuser, he actually died while I was in Afghanistan. So Mondo, he died in 2019 in prison. My
was it a
grandma
long,
also,
painful death?
yeah, I don't know what happened. I heard it was a staph infection, supposedly. I don't know.
It took him like couple months, a few years. Sorry,
It's all
you
right.
know.
Uh, but I get a call from my wife telling me that he died, and then I get another call like a couple weeks later saying that my grandma died. And so I came home from my grandma's funeral for 2 weeks, and when I came home from being in Afghanistan for 4 months, my son was conceived. So that's how that happened. And then I got back from my deployment, and my son was born, a few months after deployment, after I returned home. So
What were your thoughts when she told you that that Armando had died?
I didn't really care. Yeah,
Okay,
I like,
fair enough.
yeah, yeah, I didn't care. And I know kind of like what you had said. It's interesting. Whenever I say that he died, everybody's like always super happy, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, he deserves it." Like, fuck him, and he, I hope he died and burned in hell, and I hope he got everything that he ever had coming towards him. And that's like a cautionary thing, I would say, for most
Yeah.
people. I would say like to not have those thoughts. I just had somebody message me today about how they wrote a song about their abuser going to hell and spending their life in hell. And I just told him, I said, man, let it go, dude. Let it go. Like, me wishing the worst on you is just drinking poison and expecting you to die. You
Yeah.
know,
But
you just gotta let it go. So I didn't really care that he died. I was moved on by that point. Didn't bother me. And even now, because I've had this question asked a lot. So now my advice to people is like, dude, if somebody did you wrong, like, are you going to let that ruin your life? Like if they cut you off in traffic, is that going to piss you off for the rest of the drive? Or if they bumped into you, there's all of these things that can piss somebody off.
is it really worth the
Um,
energy?
is it worth the energy? Because it really makes a huge impact on your mental health, on your relationships, and your household. So it's just not worth it. So when he died, I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, don't care.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, is it really is it worth it? Is it at some point like when you lack of better terms, like when you fuck up when you're younger. I'm not saying you fucked up or anything like that, but like if you've done wrong in the past, it's almost to the point where like you have to forgive yourself for the things that you've done. Or and I'm not saying you like you forgave yourself or forgave him or anything like that, but like in I can only live off like per my personal experiences, right? When I fucked up in the past, like I learn from it. I forgive myself, however long that takes, whether it's a week or months or days or years, whatever it is, and then move on from it. Because the more you dwell on what happens or what had happened to you in the past, the more it just consumes your everyday life. And the fact of like that you can't heal. Once you forgive yourself, in my opinion, you can almost start like accepting the healing process, sort of thing. And I'm not saying
Dude,
like you forgave yourself or forgave him. That's just like if you've done wrong, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
well, that's interesting. I think with me too is that's what I kind of tell people the same thing. It's, even as a survivor or a victim of sexual abuse or really any kind of horrible situation, there's this level of like shame and embarrassment that comes with it. And I think so many people, they either try to run from it or people tell them like, you shouldn't be ashamed, you shouldn't be embarrassed, it wasn't your fault. And while I understand it's not my fault because I was just a child, it's still embarrassing and I'm still ashamed of it. Like I'm not proud of the things that I went through. And so for me, what really helped was accepting the fact that what happened to me was embarrassing, accepting the fact that it's okay to be ashamed of something. Like that, there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's a human
Exactly.
emotion, you know?
Yeah.
And once I accepted that, I was like, okay. And then on the topic of forgiveness, yeah, man, you got to let it go, dude. And sometimes that means forgiving the people that hurt you. Like I have no ill feelings towards this guy. I have no bad feelings towards my mom, no bad feelings towards my dad. I don't have any bad feelings towards anybody who hurt me in my life because it, like I said, it does nothing for you, you know.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
people that hurt me the most, I have forgiven. I mean, I'm not defending them. I'm not saying what they did was right, but like it is what it is, man. Like I'm not going to sit here and live in resentment and live in pain and misery because I've lived that life and it sucks, man. You know, if you think it's tragic to like grow up without a father and to be abused or to be, you know, taken advantage of in any form or fashion, if you think those things are tragic, like imagine how tragic it would be for you to live the rest of your life in absolute misery and
Yeah.
loneliness and
Yeah.
pain and suffering. Like that's the tragedy, you know?
Yeah.
Like the beauty in all of that, the beauty is like finding a life of hope and happiness and love despite everything you've been through. Like life can be beautiful no matter what. You just have to be willing to take those steps, you know?
Yeah. How did your wife initially take everything when you told her, when you guys started, like, I assume it must have taken you a little bit to open up about what had happened, if not like, maybe just bits and pieces here and there, and then it probably might have all come out at one time. But how did she initially, like, how did you approach it with her? And then how did she take it?
So that's another great question.
Thanks. I got a couple of them tonight. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting just because I say this humbly, but I know that I'm like an anomaly. I know that I am vastly different than most people in this space, and so
Like, how so?
well, the way I've handled everything, but this is a great point. Is I told my wife what happened to me like 3 months into dating.
Wow.
Like I like we were talking about getting married, and I told her I was like, and I'd never dated a girl before. Like my wife's the only girl I've ever dated, and so when things were kind of getting a little bit serious, I said, hey, like if you want to be with me, like I've got some problems. Like I'm fucked up. Is what I told her. I was like, I've got a lot of problems. I've been through a lot of shit in my life, and she didn't flinch. She was just like, okay, like I don't really like I don't know why you're telling like I don't know what that means. Like like what's that got to do with me? Basically, is what she's saying. You know, like I'm good. I love you. I'm here for you. I don't really care what happened to you in your past. You know, in a sense of like it's not going to change my opinion of you. And so I was just like, all right. And so we got married, and then told her like I guess when we were young, I hit the top waves of everything. Like I was abused, I was sexually abused, I was molested by this man, you know, this and that. Um, I thought that I told her more than I did. I mean, I know I told her that. I mean, she knew that much. But when I wrote my book, she read the book before it came out, you know.
Hmm.
And when she read it, she got done and she was like, I had no idea that it was that bad, you know. And she's like, I don't know how the hell you survived, you know. So she was like blown away after she read my book, which is kind of cool to hear. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, no, I told her pretty quick. You know, I know that's something that most people don't do. Most people have trouble kind of confiding in their partner, especially in that regard. So yeah, I told her relatively quick.
That's good. I mean, I can only like you. I think it would have been worse if you didn't tell her, and it's been years and a decade or whatever it's been, and now you're finally telling her. I mean, 'cause you guys have children in common. Like one of the questions I did write down, I was going to ask you later on, but what was like you have a 6 and 8 year old now, right? 4,
Four and six.
4 and 6. Sorry. Um, how do you like? Obviously, you've written a book, and it's out there, and I assume it's going to be out there forever. I don't really know how the book process works, but it's going to be out there for years in podcasts and interviews, and this shit lives online for forever, essentially. How do you like expect to talk to them about like either your past or about what had happened to you, or has that like crossed your mind yet at all? I mean, I assume it has. It would have for me. So
Yeah, so I get this from the answer for that question comes from my mentor again, Nick Lavery. I heard him talk about this on a podcast where they asked him, what do you tell your boys? Because he's got a mechanical leg, he's got a
yeah,
prosthetic,
oh yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So like they asked him, like, what do you tell your boys? Because that's something they can see right now. My
hmm
kids have no idea what happened to me, but um, that's something that his kids can see. And so he tells them his answer for that question is, look, there's bad people in the world, and daddy's job was to go and take care of them. And unfortunately, they hurt me, but it's okay because I'm okay. And now I go around and I tell people my story about what happened to me, and I make other people feel better. And so that's my answer to my kids when they finally get to the point of understanding. That'll be my answer to them is like, hey, look, daddy, didn't have a good life growing up, but it's okay because daddy's okay now. And now daddy travels and speaks, and daddy wrote a book, and now daddy's trying to help other people get through their challenges and get through their hard times in life. My kids both know that I wrote a book. My daughter,
hmm
especially, she's a little bit older. She's reading and everything. So they know that I wrote a book. They know that I travel. My daughter asked me, like, Daddy, why are you traveling again? Why are you leaving again? And I tell her, like, hey, um, Daddy didn't have a good life growing up. And so now I kind of tell people my story so that they can either learn or become better or, feel inspired or, proud or whatever it is. So that's the kind of the answer for now.
hmm
And then I guess my only concern in the future is when kids find out that my daughter's you know dad or my son's dad wrote a book, and then they find out what happened to their dad. So then they go to school, and then other kids are saying things like,
yeah,
other kids are saying, hey, your daddy was this or that. And when that happens, we'll face that when it gets here. But the most I can do is lead by example, right? So the most
yeah,
I can do now is control what I can control and leave the rest, leave it all, let the rest of it go. And I think if I live by the right example, treating people the right way, being the right kind of person, when those challenging moments come, my children will be fine. Worst comes to worst, I'll drive to the school and you know, beat someone's dad's ass, for letting their kids be assholes. But
yeah, yeah.
um, you know, my kids, um, I think as long as I do the right things and lead the right ways, they will. And then when that time comes, like, I'll let them know, like, hey, here's how you navigate that situation.
Yep.
Walk away from it or punch them in the mouth, whatever it might be, depending on the situation. So,
I get it. I get it. I didn't hear it because I'm a cop, but I get it. So, why did you? I'm in the. I was started did 6 years in the reserves myself. I was a medic. Uh, excuse me, and I'm in the guard right now. Did you enjoy your time in the army?
yeah, man, I did. The army was one of the best decisions I ever made, man. Like, despite all the dumb shit that I did and like kind of went through and all that, like, it was one of the best decisions I made. Um, just joining the reserves, it kind of helped me out a little bit. And then when I went active, especially going active duty, kind of gave me a steady paycheck, place to sleep,
Yeah.
structure. It gave me mentorship and men and things like that I needed in my life to really grow up. So yeah, the army was a great experience. You meet the best people in the world, man. You meet your
hmm
best fucking friends in the army. The unfortunate part of that is you all go your separate ways.
Yeah.
You go home, they go home, and then you never see each other again. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah. You said you did what total of how many years?
Total like 9 years ish, somewhere like
hmm
8 or 9 years. Yeah, three of that was reserves, and then six was in the active.
All as
So,
infantry, 11 Bravo, or
well, initially I was a mechanic. I joined as a mechanic in the reserves because I thought that
yeah.
everybody was an infantryman because that's what the recruiter said, and so I didn't even know like what the reserves was. I was like, okay, I'm just in the army now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea. So
Yeah, I get it because I was. I mean, I enlisted at 30 years old, so I was that guy at Fort Benning when I went through and or whatever it's called now. I can't remember, but Fort Moore, I think it is. But um, Yeah, so I get it. It's the Army is the reserves is another beast in itself in dealing with them. But no, the Army, like you said, you make your best of friends, and eventually you all go your separate ways, and you text groups every now and then, all that sort of stuff. But you said you when you came back, excuse me, from your deployment, you were like sitting on the couch with your, the sofa with your son when he was 2 years old, and having suicidal like ideations for sake of argument. How did you eventually end up overcoming that?
Man, I just hung on. I guess I just hung on to life. My wife helped me out a lot.
Hmm.
During that time, there was a particular day where like I was kind of going through the apartment, cleaning, and I just couldn't stop moving. I just had to keep moving. I was cleaning and moving shit around, whatever. And one day she just stopped me and was like, "Are you okay?" And I just like I fell apart, just started crying, and she just held me and hugged me. And so my wife has loved me like unconditionally throughout all
Hmm.
this shit, and that's probably one of the biggest things that's got me through it all. I think if I wouldn't have had her, or if she would have left me, I probably would have taken my life. I mean, I've tried to push her away multiple times in multiple ways, and I think if she would have walked away when I asked her to, and the several times I have it was probably a cry for help for me. As just I want her to get away from me so that I can finish the job and get this thing over with.
I was just thinking
So
that. Yeah, it must have been because
yeah,
it's. Did you? I'm not putting like my clinician hat on or anything like that, but like I could almost see it as like an abandonment thing from like being
yeah,
younger or something like that, and you're trying to have her
yeah.
abandon you, so you have a legit reason as to why. Have you ever sought some sort of counseling after that?
Not like professionally in a room with a therapist. I've gotten counseling from my mentors now. I've gotten counseling from people and books. I guess
Yeah.
I read a lot of books and I do a lot of stuff like that, but I've never, still to this day, I've never sat down with like a counselor or a professional in the field.
Yeah, I mean, I have numerous times, and it took me I want to say it was like my fourth counselor to actually like get a good rapport with that person. Like the first one was looking out the window as I was talking, sort of thing, like checking out the fucking trees and the birds in the trees, and then like just having a good rapport. And it took me a good I want to say it was like the fourth counselor I'd ever gone to have like a good rapport with that person to eventually open up to him. And to me, it was a lot more. It was, I say, a lot more cathartic. It was cathartic in general, just to be able to talk about whatever it was that was going on in my life at that time, and to just, even if it was like for me to organize my thoughts and get them out to somebody and have them kind of like talk me through that process. And it is really, I think it is really a tool that is a good thing. And yeah, I mean, did she ever was she ever like threatened when you said like, hey, like I'm not only having thoughts of like harming myself but also including like our child at that time? Was she never like left the house or anything?
I never said that out loud. I think I talked about taking my own life,
Hmm.
but I've never admitted about wanting like the thoughts of killing my own kids
Hmm.
until recently. Like that was something that I kept under wraps because that's I mean that's heavy, man. That's like really
It is.
dark.
Yeah, I get
And
it.
people do it, people do that though. And that's the reason why I started talking about it recently is because people do that, man. And there are people out there that have those thoughts every day. And they probably are trapped in their head thinking I'm the only one, nobody else is having these thoughts. I'm all alone. And I had those thoughts. And so recently I was just like, man, like this is something that I've never wanted to say out loud because it's, on the internet and you're going to get attacked or whatever. But I'm just going to say this, man, like this happened and I had these thoughts. And I hope that it brings some level of like authenticity to me, I'm
Yeah,
not I'm not scared to talk about my flaws. I'm not scared to talk about the things that I've done that I'm not proud of, or the thoughts that I've had, or So at the time, though, I wasn't talking about it. I mean, at the time, I was scared. I didn't want to tell anybody that because especially in the military, if the batteries go dead, they just get rid of you, man. Like, well, at
Yeah.
least that's how it was when I was in there. When I was in the military, if your batteries went bad, like they were just like, all right, get rid of them. It wasn't like give this guy a break or give him some help or send him to therapy. It was like, okay, he's mentally unstable. Or take his weapon, take his shoelaces, and kick him out. He's unfit for duty.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
just, and I know that because regrettably, and this is another point that I'm not proud of, but I'll talk about it, is I kicked guys out for being unfit for duty for mental health. Guys would say they were suicidal. I'm like, all right, kick him out. He wants to get out of the army. Instead of fucking helping the guy out, I would just boot him. Or I would at least try to, or I would go along with the process. I mean, I didn't have the power to kick these guys out, but I
Okay.
would go along with the ride, or I would reinforce it or whatever. Like I would support these decisions versus saying, and all the while I was dealing with the same fucking problems, but I
Hmm.
was too scared to ask for help. I was too scared to freaking go and talk to somebody. And like I said, part of that was because I knew how the army worked. I knew that if you told anybody what happened to you and you told them that you were having bad thoughts, they were going to get rid of you. And I think it's changed now. I think the Army's doing a lot better in that regard now. But when I was in, um, I'd seen it happen multiple times. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's better, at least in my experience. Like I said, I'll be 38 this year. I enlisted at turn 29 or turn excuse me at 29, turn 30 at in middle basic training, and I think at least in my experience, it's a little bit different than what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's everyone has their own experience. Maybe active duty is different than the reserves and the guard, but I think it has the page has turned on that, and especially within like the first responder world and in law enforcement, the guys that I've seen that have gone through issues, it's you know prior to the 90s, early 2000s, it was you didn't talk about it because you're going to get your gun, your badge taken away. You're not going to have a job tomorrow, and how you're going to pay your bills. And I think it's definitely the page has turned on that to like if somebody comes in and they're in a fucking shitty mood, like, and you've noticed that their behaviors changed over the past 4 or 5, 6 months, like there could be something going on with that person. So let's try to get them help and not necessarily kick them right out or fire them from their job. I think the culture has changed with that.
well,
So it's a
I think it may not have been as bad as I remember it to be. I don't know, but I think what I heard somebody was it might have been Andy Stump who said it was that the leadership needs to come down and like start talking. Like the leadership needs to get help because a
yes,
lot of times what happens is you have these leaders that have been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years and they're smoked and burnt out and they're pissed off old salty men and they've got mental health problems because they've never been to therapy or they never talked about it, whether they've been to therapy or not. They've never talked about it. They've never admitted that anything's wrong. And so they're pissed off all the time. So if the leaders of the unit or the company or whatever, if they won't be transparent with their guys and they won't be vulnerable with their guys, what are your guys going to do? They're going to lock up too. They're going to shell up too. Like I'm not going to talk about it. We don't talk about that
exactly.
here,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
And so when I was in the military, that's how it was, man. I mean, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division. Like we're freaking
Mhm.
paratroopers. We've got Rangers and SF and all these freaking guys out here. Like we're hardcore, good to go, like whatever. So you were not going to be that guy who went to the doctor and said, "I need some fucking help." Like that's just how it was when I was in, man. And I do think things have changed drastically in the last few years, and I think I've seen it in the first responder world as well. I think I've seen a lot of first responder support, which, I mean, first responders need it. Anybody with any kind of job, I mean, almost, quite literally anybody could use help, right? I
Yeah.
mean, anybody could
Anybody.
use help. It just takes the leadership to come out and say, hey, man, I had a bad day too. And I have bad thoughts too. And I had bad days too. But the leadership doesn't ever want to do it. I work in
Yeah.
a construction company and, you know, you could be in a corporate America, you could be working for any corporate America job, whatever. And the leadership, they won't come out and talk about you don't have to talk about your problems. I'm not saying you have to tell me what's going on, but they won't even say like, "Hey, man, I had a bad day," or I'm having a bad day," or "I'm having a bad week. I need some help." Whatever. So if the leaders won't come out and do it, your people are not going to do it. Like
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And so it is what it is. I mean, the leaders have to step down and freaking talk to their people a little bit more and be a little bit more open with them.
And yeah, it's not to say that like if I know guys that have done that. I mean, leaders in it's either sergeants for PDs or lieutenants or captains, chiefs, all that sort of stuff. And I know guys that are supervisors that have talked about that. And I guess to say like, not that I didn't have respect for them, but if I gained more respect for them if they have done that and say like, sit down with them, talk about what's going on. This is how. I mean, I've done it with people that are junior to me, and it's out there in the open that I've talked about it on the podcast, so like they can listen to it anytime. But like, it's if I think like I said, I think it's important for supervisors or team leaders, commanding officers, chiefs to come down and say like, not like you said, not like you have to talk about what in particular what was happening, but I was feeling like shit for whatever reason, and this is how I dealt with it, and you add a little bit to the what's that Jocko term when he talks about like leadership bank or leadership capital, and I think you gain more respect amongst the guys when you talk about it. I know we got to wrap up soon. We both got to put our children to bed. I can hear my wife up there struggling with them right now.
Yeah.
But where can people? Do you have anything you want to add before I even ask this like final question? Like, have anything you want to mention, talk about, anything like that?
I would say, man, first off, thanks for having me on. Thanks for
Dude,
everybody for anybody who
thank
listens,
you.
but yeah, of course. But
I
then,
hope you gain my 12 listeners and my 12 subscribers on my Instagram go to you. So that would be
yeah,
good.
well, yeah, man, just don't be afraid to ask for help, man. Don't be afraid to reach out, ask for help. We all got fucking mountains, man.
Yeah.
Mine's not bigger than anybody else's. We all go through what we go through. And with a little bit of help from everybody else, we'll all get through this shit together and hopefully get on the other side of it. So that's all I got, man. I mean, I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you coming on, and I really do. And I'm sorry it took me years to have you on, but I'm back to doing these now, and it's I enjoy them. I mean, I don't know from your side if it bringing up the worst things that have happened to you, um, or any like and essentially cathartic to you. I assume that like a little bit of it is, but I think podcasts are fun. Do you listen to any podcasts at all?
Yeah, I do. I listen to a bunch of them. I listen to Joe Rogan, Sean Ryan, Jocko, a couple others, here and there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books.
Yeah, yeah. The Jocko podcast for me are my it's like I read a book because I like the ones
Yeah,
when he talks about like when war stories or whatever it is, just like people's biographies. That's my version of reading a book just because of like how much I drive now. So
yeah.
um no, they're good. Where can people find you if they want to book you and or buy your book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. Strength Beyond the Shadows is available on Amazon. It's also on my website, sethgehle.com. If they want signed copies, they can go there. I can sign them and ship them. That's the same thing. If you want to, book me to speak, you can find my email address and booking stuff through that. But also, Instagram is really the easiest way to find me, Seth_Gehle. If you Google me, you'll find me. It's what year is it now? 2025. Yeah, if you can't find me with a quick Google search and a little bit of legwork, you're not looking hard enough.
I
So
mean, if you found Chad after calling all the PDs he used to work for, I think they could find you nowadays. So
exactly.
I would love to hear like an interview or some podcast or if you want, I'd be more than happy to. I'd like to have you guys in person. But that would be a really interesting conversation. I think you and him on a podcast talking about like your different perspectives of what was going on at that point in time. I think that would be really interesting. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
dude, I will definitely plug your stuff in the show notes here. The Strength Beyond the Shadows, and like you said, Amazon. Can they go down to Barnes and Noble and get it? I mean, it's probably like
No,
nothing
Amazon.
like
It's
that.
kind of weird when you self-publish. It's kind of weird. I don't have it in any bookstores yet, so it's just online.
Okay. Do you ship it right from your house? Is that how I'm kind of curious now. Like, is that how it works? Because I have a
Uh,
small business and I ship right from my house. So,
well, so if it's a signed copy, I'll sign them and ship them from my house. If you order through Amazon, Amazon does it themselves. They print on demand. So as soon as you order it, they'll print it and ship it within a
oh
couple days.
shit. Oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting to know.
yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate you coming out tonight, and I look forward to talking to you in the future, bud.
All right. Thanks, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.